ahead. We're started. Okay. You're ready.
I call tonight's hearing to order. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Arva Rice, President and CEO of the New York Urban League. Henry Gallardo, who will be joining us momentarily, are the co-chairs of the NYC Commission to Strengthen Local Democracy. Before we dive into the testimony for our final public hearing, Co-Chair Gallardo and I want to reflect on this commission's work and why it matters. At a time when the American experiment is facing unprecedented challenges, the importance of robust, accountable, and transparent local governance could not be clearer. This commission was therefore created with a timely and deliberate charge to strengthen local democracy in New York City by reviewing the city charter. Because the charter plays a vital role in establishing the structure and procedure of city government, it shapes how decisions are made on a wide range of issues affecting everyday New Yorkers. Our goal isn't simply to update our city's foundational document. It is also to help build a healthier democracy, one that empowers communities, clarifies the role and responsibilities of public servants, and guards against the misuse of power. From the beginning, we've grounded our work in the voices of this great city. Across 15 borough-based hearings with testimony from elected and government officials, community leaders, good government groups, academics, and concerned residents, we've listened intently. We've heard from those eager for greater transparency and stronger accountability in government. And while not every good idea that we've heard can be implemented through charter revision, our work has helped elevate important conversation that can and should continue well beyond this commission's tenure. As we move towards final recommendations, we want to underscore two guiding principles of our work. First, although our commission was convened by the City Council, we have operated independently, and we will continue to do so. Second, we remain firmly committed to considering only those reforms that enhance, not weaken New Yorkers' rights. Finally, we want to acknowledge the collective dedication of our fellow commissioners and the commission staff. You've brought empathy, vision, and a deep belief in the importance of good governance to this process. With that said, we'll turn over our introductions. Serving today as counsel is Henry Isaiah Black, and I'd like the members of the commission to briefly introduce themselves, starting on the dais with Commissioner Griffith.
Yes. Good evening. Mark Winston Griffith, representing the Public Advocate, Jumaane Williams.
Manny Pastration, and I have the honor of being appointed by Speaker Adams.
Hello, I'm Andrea Salwin Copel, also appointed by Speaker Adams.
Rod Jones, and also appointed by Speaker Adams.
Joanne Yu, appointed by Speaker Adams.
Good evening, Robert Raglia, representing Bronx Borough President Vanessa L. Gibson.
Alan Swisher, appointed by Queensborough President Donovan Richards.
Good evening, Navardo Lopez, appointed by Speaker Adams.
And we have a couple of commissioners on Zoom.
Sure, I could go. Mike Graciopo, appointed by Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso.
Good evening, Rahul Agarwal, appointed by Mayor Adams.
Dr. Ram Raju, appointed by the Staten Island Borough President Vito Fasella.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for those introductions. We'll now turn to the testimony portion of tonight's agenda. Before we begin, I remind those in attendance that this is a formal government proceeding and that a decorum must always be observed. As such, audience members shall remain silent at all times. If you intend to testify today but have not yet registered to do so, we will accept registrations up to the first 30 minutes of tonight's hearing. The witness podium is reserved for people who wish to testify. Video recordings or photography is not allowed from the witness podium. At tonight's hearing, we will ask folks to limit their testimony to 3 minutes. I will let you know when your time is up. We welcome any testimony on proposed revisions to the charter. Finally, I ask that our witnesses and commissioners speak directly into their mics so that our Zoom attendees can clearly hear you. I would like to call our first speaker to the dais, and that is Speaker Adrienne Adams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. Thank you to Chairs Garrido and Rice and to all of the commissioners for your exemplary service. Accountability and transparency of government are core foundations of a functioning democracy. Yet, the undermining of democracy has become far too normalized, especially by those responsible for upholding them. Here in New York City, there have been frontal assaults on checks and balances and the separation of powers, which have fueled abuses of power and the weaponization of executive overreach. The last 3+ years have made clear that we must take affirmative steps to strengthen the mechanisms of government accountability and transparency. This commission to strengthen local democracy was formed because New Yorkers deserve better. This is not about any single individual, but our specific experiences must inform our actions. New Yorkers deserve a city charter that ensures no one is above public accountability and that safeguards exist to ensure city government always represents the people and is accountable to them. That is why I'm here to testify today in support of this commission's proposals. Independent oversight agencies play a critical role in holding our entire city government accountable to the public interest through their charter-mandated responsibilities. They must have independently set budget levels that ensure adequate resources to fulfill their vital missions. Additionally, I support the proposal for DOI's commissioner to serve a 5-year term and be further protected against unjustified removal for political reasons. The current requirement that CCHR consult with the mayor prior to investigating any city official or agency should be removed to prevent undue political interference that obstructs discrimination investigations of a mayoral administration. Finally, the independence of the city's corporation council, which serves as the top attorney for all city officials and agencies, should be bolstered. This commission can strengthen these protections by prohibiting their removal unless there is cause, with an exception during the first 90 days of a newly elected mayor's term. I also support the additional recommendations for these oversight bodies, including adjusting the composition of the CCRB for increased operational efficiency. Many of these proposals emerged from the need to protect against a mayor whose commitment to the public has been compromised, something the city and governor were forced to consider earlier this year with the current mayor. Currently, the city charter has no mechanism to consider the removal of our city's mayor when the public has entirely lost confidence in a mayor's commitment to the city's public interest, and they are not incapacitated. For this reason, I support the proposal to establish a process for mayoral removal in cases of serious misconduct and loss of public trust, as trust is necessary to govern. This proposal sets an appropriately high bar for removal, ensuring the process is deliberative and democratic, leaving the ultimate decision up to voters after a supermajority of the council has approved consideration and subsequently approved voters to make such a decision. Continuing the goal of transparency, the commission's proposals can also increase budget transparency more broadly by ensuring units of appropriation are transparent, narrowing overly expansive impoundment powers, establishing stronger policies on the city's budget reserves, and promoting more accurate revenue projections are all steps forward. I'm also pleased to see that the commission has reviewed the issue of advice and consent, which most city and state governments utilize to confirm executive appointments. In New York City, the 2019 Charter Revision Commission introduced a proposal to subject the Corporation Council to advice and consent. The voters approved it with 77.4% voting in favor. Advice and consent is a well-established safeguard of democracy to ensure that the government prioritizes the public interest rather than those of individuals. It can strengthen the city's government and representative democracy by ensuring that appointments for agency commissioners are based on qualifications and the public interest rather than on political loyalty or other motivations. I strongly support expanding advice and consent in New York City, which is currently out of step with other local governments across our nation. Lastly, one of my proudest accomplishments as Speaker has been the passage of the Fair Housing Framework Law, Planning Framework. I am pleased to see this commission take the opportunity to propose a meaningful community planning process that is neither overly burdensome nor unusable. This is an important pathway towards a more affordable city. I've been so proud of the work this commission has done to engage the community and experts to bring forth these recommendations. My remarks are in full at your disposal, and I look forward to seeing your final report. Thank you so much for your service.
Madam Speaker, if you could just wait a moment to see if any of the commissioners have any questions of you.
Not a question really, Madam Speaker, just more of a thank you. Thank you for appointing this commission. Thank you for giving us the independence to do our work and to deliberate. And again, thank you for the honor of appointing myself and my colleagues here. It's been a wonderful experience over the last 4 months. And thank you also for your service to the city.
Thank you very much for that.
Any questions? Commissioner Yu?
I don't have any question, but I also want to echo my thanks. I think what we've heard from New Yorkers, I think those of us who work in nonprofit, who work in government, sometimes could be out of touch with regular New Yorkers, but the things that we heard from the public and their ideas, it was incredible, and we heard a lot. And a lot of it was homework for us to think about for years to come, but some of it was very painful that we have to admit that we have failed our fellow New Yorkers. And so I too consider this a tremendous privilege and an honor, and thank you so much for convening us, and it's been a pleasure working with my fellow commissioners.
Thank you for your service.
Good evening. Thank you for your, I won't call it testimony, your remarks. Thank you. I guess my question is around the fact that we know that the mayor's commission is preempting probably will preempt what we're able to do here today. What is your, I don't know, projection on what we're working on actually seeing the light of day at some point?
Well, the good news is that the state passed a law a couple of weeks ago, so we can no longer be bumped. And we have equal opportunity to present these proposals to our voters.
Do you anticipate that the governor will sign that bill?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the commissioner?
I'm just going to add my thanks for creating the commission. I think it has been an important way to get at the very issues you started with around accountability and transparency and the important issues that underlie them as we think about, not just the past, but more importantly, how we go forward. So I appreciate the honor of being appointed, the creation of the commission, and I will add thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
I have just one question for you in regards to advice and consent. I just wanted to hear a little bit further from you on when you think about the commissioners in the city, is the advice and consent, are there particular ones that you are concerned about, whether it's the police commissioner or is it across the board that you agree with the recommendations from the staff?
Yeah, we had a few off the top of my head. I don't remember because there is a list and we can get that to you. The rationale behind it, of course, is that the council already has, jurisdictional advice and consent in place for some agency heads and others. And it's an opportunity for the public, just like Commissioner Yu just said, for the public to be heard. And for, we have seen cronyism, quite frankly, in this administration that has not worked very well. It has left the public disappointed and traumatized. I've used that word a lot over the past few months. And the council feels that there should be an opportunity for the public to have the final say. Just like the public has a say in our oversight hearings for each hearing that the council conducts, we feel that for certain agencies, the public ought to have say-so in who that commissioner or agency head is. One that comes to mind is sanitation, but there are several of them, and we will get that to you. Mhm.
Sure. Thank you so much, and
Commissioners,
thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Doing here.
I would like to call our next witness to the dais, and we'd like to call the Honorable Public Advocate, Jumaane Williams.
Let's start. Oh,
Yes, you may begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Peace and blessing, love and light to everybody. I just want to say kudos to the speaker. I think she left already, but she's just done a bang-up job of pushing back at a time when we needed some pushing back on, and the fruits of that labor is now being seen. So I wanted to make sure I said that. Just welcome to everybody on the entire board. And as mentioned, my name is Jumaane Williams, Public Advocate. I have the pleasure of serving as the Public Advocate for the City of New York. I want to thank this commission for inviting me again to testify today. Once again, I want to thank the chairs, Garrido, who is not here, and Rice, as well as members of the commission, and my fellow New Yorkers for their participation in this open and transparent process to make government better and fairer. My previous testimony touched on government and accountability, specifically reforms to government oversight bodies like Board of Corrections, BOC, and the Civilian Complaint Review Board, CCRB, recommendations that I was pleased to see reflected in the commission's recent recommendations. I do, however, want to reiterate two recommendations respective to my office: the need for subpoena power and for standing to sue. The Office of Public Advocate may petition for a summary inquiry under Charter 1109, but only for instances where a city agency or official has not upheld the law or failed in performing a specific duty required of them by law. The Public Advocate, amongst other city elected officials, the Commissioner of Investigation, or any 5 tax-paying citizens, can ask the New York Supreme Court to institute a summary inquiry into any alleged violation or neglect of duty in relation to the property, government, or affairs of the city. This process requires filing a lawsuit that the agency from which information is being sought to answer the complaint and argue to the court why it shouldn't grant the inquiry, with further ability to appeal an affirmative ruling, in an expensive and very time-consuming process. Subpoena power, on the other hand, would not require my office to go to court first and expend limited money and resources for information that, under purview of the charter, should be shared if requested. Giving the office full subpoena power would better allow the office to fulfill its duties as mandated by the existing charter. Additionally, the charter does not make clear the public advocate's standing to sue on behalf of the residents of New York City, because the law department determines which cases can be pursued. This violates the intended separation of powers among city officials, as the Office of the Public Advocate is independent from mayoral agencies. Clarifying standing to sue would improve in transparency and accountability in New York City. The governor recently acknowledged that in the current climate of corruption and the appearance of corruption, citywide elected officials in New York City should have the ability to hire independent counsel and have standing to sue. Finally, on the question of commissions and boards, I was asked by a member of the commission during my previous testimony if I believe there was a commission or board that the public advocate should have appointments for. I'd like to propose an appointee by the public advocate for the Franchise and Concessions Review Committee. Under the charter, the FCRC is composed of elected officials and/or of the designees as their designees, and/or their designees as appointed by the mayor, the comptroller of the corporation council, the director of office management and budget, and one additional appointee chosen by the mayor. A borough president or their appointed designee may also serve on the FCRC if the franchise or concession before the committee is located within their borough. Given the citywide perspective this committee holds, I believe that amending the charter to include an appointee by the public advocate would be suitable. Look forward to answering any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Yes.
Good to see you, Public Advocate.
Always good to
How
see
are
you
you
too.
doing?
I'm alive, upright, currently not crying. Yes.
I was hoping that between you and Councilmember Hudson, I'd see some little ones here, but I will.
Let me see a
for
big
next
one. I got
time.
shut out my wife and my
I see
16-year-old
that.
over.
I see that.
Yeah.
I love that you made this into a family affair. My question is about subpoena.
My wife.
Uh, the public advocate is the first in line after the mayor. Do you see with the subpoena power, do you see any potential abuses? Should you have to the public advocate has to use that power?
I mean, I think there's potential for abuses in almost everything. So the short answer would be yes. And we should try to find ways to minimize that abuse. When I first started, I remember the first commission, I put 3 things out to try to strengthen the office. One of them has been adopted, which is with our budget, it can no longer just be taken away the way it was for Betsy Gottbaum. And the other, it was really 2 at that point. It was this and the subpoena power. And now the standing and sue, I think, is important just to strengthen what the office can do. If there's ways that we can provide it and kind of try to put guardrails on, you know, the ability to possibly abuse it, I think we should and open for it. I don't think the possibility for abuse is a reason not to do it. Unfortunately, we've elected a lot of unscrupulous people that find ways to abuse power and will probably continue to do so. This is a way to try to hopefully provide some checks and balances in a way that I think was intended, but not necessarily empowered to do.
I think there was it's not what you testified to, but just to get your thoughts. During the whole what's happening in our city, there was a lot of confusion, and I think there was a lot of public misunderstanding about the role of the public advocate and how important that role is. Do you think that there are things that we should think about to be able to strengthen those roles and to be able to make sure that people understand how critical that the public advocate position is?
I think so, and I know I'm assuming you're talking about the time where we didn't know if the mayor was going to be removed or not. There's a few months I had a lot of friends. They've since disappeared. But I do think there are things that we can do to empower, and I have some ideas about that. But I think these are particularly helpful because I think we've been good at kind of raising at least what the office does. We've actually had other cities reached out that we've testified for because they saw some of the work that we did. So I'm proud about that. But I do think with some of these increased powers, there are things that we ask for that we may or may not get. And using the limited resources we have, trying to figure out when to press and when not to press, I think people would see it even more if we were able to demand that this information was given, and then we can make use of it in a much more public way. So the things we're testifying for today, I think would directly help with the things that you've raised. Thank you.
Good evening, Public Advocate.
Good evening.
Just a quick question about budget. So does your office have the necessary dollars for counsel should you have subpoena power?
I don't know that you'll find anybody that ever says they have enough money. So we're still there, but we do have less money than most of the borough presidents. So it is a challenge. But we have an awesome general counsel, and we have attorneys, and we'll be hiring up another attorney. I do think we have what we need. If we had subpoena power, we can always use more. I don't think our budget in general is what it should be for a citywide elected office. And so percentage-wise, I think we're able to provide what is needed. An increase in the budget overall would be very helpful to do the citywide job, not just about subpoena, but just about the job as a whole and what we're required to do, even by the charter now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Public Advocate, for being here tonight. I had a question about your proposal to have standing to sue. As someone who serves as general counsel for a non-mayoral agency, this is an issue that I've thought a lot about as well. And I just wanted a little clarity about your proposal. So specifically, it's about to have standing to sue and to hire outside counsel not to compel corporation counsel to represent the public advocate, correct?
Yeah, it would be to be able to get outside counsel to do it because we've run into a lot of issues. Obviously, corp counsel, and it should be, the council should be the entire for the city, but it generally and too often doesn't feel like it. And so there seems to be conflicts of when we're trying to zoo and having to almost get permission from the people, but you may be in challenge with, which doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, I think that our experience has been very similar in that respect. So, certainly, the corporation counsel, I'm at least understanding of the situation where they might be in, where they have two different clients who might have competing views, and that puts them in a difficult situation. But I think the proposal to have the public advocate, the ability to have more teeth behind potential litigation, I think is something we should consider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mr. Public Advocate, and thank you for being here today, and thank you for your testimony. My question is regarding our recommendation about, mayoral removal. Since your office, you are first in line in the event that a mayor would be removed or incapacitated. Just wanted to know your thoughts on our proposal. Do we strike the right balance? Is there anything that you think we've missed? Or anything we can potentially add to our proposal on having the council vote to begin an inquiry and then vote a second time with a supermajority to send the question to the voters?
What was added is the supermajority to send to the voters.
Right, so there would first be a supermajority of the council, a supermajority vote of the council to begin the inquiry, and then a second vote of a higher threshold, 80% of the council, to then send the question within 60 days to the voters of the city to whether or not the mayor should be removed or not.
Yeah, I think the truth is, there's never, obviously there was an ability to remove now that I think wasn't the greatest. There's probably going to be never a perfect way to do it. That does sound like at least a way that everybody kind of is involved. You got the legislature involved, you got the people involved. So I think it sounds good. I hope to never be in a situation again. And I've been very public about how bad I think this mayor has governed, and can't wait to be past this administration as quickly as humanly possible. But I do think we need a realer way. This sounds like a more real way to do a recall. And it's not too easy, but it's also not impossible. You always want to make sure that it's not something that can be used flippantly. But if it's necessary, which again, I've tried to be really careful with my words because I was next in line. But if there was ever a time to have thought about it, we probably were in that time. And I don't think there was a real way to do it. And this provides, this lifts some of the burden of a one person to try to make the decision. So I think it sounds like a good balance.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So first, I just want to thank you for your testimony. It's good things to think about and important issues. And I also just want to thank for your previous testimony of your office around the Board of Corrections and the CCRB and really the work that you've done in those areas. I think it's given us a lot of food for thought as we go forward. So more of a statement than a question, but I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Me too.
I sort of want to follow up on a question we had before, which kind of pulls back and looks at what we've been doing here through this exercise. And wondering do you feel like there's anything we sort of left on or off the table? Is there any area of government that, regardless of how you feel about this particular mayor, when you sort of peer back and look at the balance of power across government here in New York City, do you feel like there's more work to be done beyond what this commission has already proposed?
That's an interesting question. I would say probably, I don't know that these conversations should, quite frankly, ever stop. I think we get stuck in a way of doing things. We should be constantly, asking these questions. This mayoralty, regardless of the mayor, is the strongest mayoralty in the country, and that provides its own set of problems. So trying to figure out how to rebalance that, I think, is important. While, quite frankly, you want the mayor to have the ability to do his or her job. So that's important as well. It's been impressive because when the commission started, it seemed like it was I was all for it and was pushing it, but it did seem like the exercise wasn't going to yield what we wanted to yield. And because everybody took it as seriously as they should, we're actually going to probably see some results. And that's just awesome. And just to show the dedication of the people that we put on here. I would think about that some more because I believe the answer is yes, particularly around budget and who gets to decide when, where, how we spend the budget. There's always things around housing that I think is bubbling up, and I've read some things on the mayor's side that concerns me a little bit as we're trying to find the right balance of how to do this. So I think the answer is yes. I would like to think about it some more and really pinpoint where that will be so that government is moving more equitably on behalf of folks. I think the commission, the advice and consent of commissioners are extremely important. Although the two most important ones are probably not listed in there, which is NYPD and Department of Education. I think are probably the two most important ones to try to get in there. So that would be interesting to see happen someday.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, just one more question going back to the issue of the standing to sue. And I know that my concern is supposed to be around when that could be politicized, but my concern is around those times where there were genuine differences with the mayor that were based on law and morality. and I think about, had you had this power at those times, and so how would you balance it when you're going against a mayor that you really truly believe that what they're doing is wrong? Like, how would you keep chaos from happening with different different legal teams battling at the same time?
Again, I think sometimes that depends. It's hard to make these things on every eventuality because you never know who's going to be there and not be there. So I think you try to set up the tools to get the person to be able to be able to perform the function. And so I think the courts also can help. The courts also can say when something is frivolous or not frivolous. The courts can also say when somebody actually won something or didn't win something. I think it would have been very interesting at that time because I don't think the people had someone protecting them the way that they should, and there were some things happening. And we saw just recently with the local law 42, there was abuse of power literally happening that the judge said we were correct on, myself and the speaker and the city council. So I think there's always possibilities for that. But in order to be able to do the job, I think you need to have some of the tools and the teeth and just try to figure out how best to confine it so that, it's not abused. But I do think it is necessary. I mean, I've been, even as in the city council, we tried to be part of a lawsuit around dealing with the tax issues, the tax code, and we were just told we got kicked off. We just couldn't do it. So there are problems with the way it's set up now, and I understand why. It probably made a little more sense as a council, but as a public advocate who's like separate fully and thoroughly from the mayor agency, it probably makes sense to be able to do something like this on behalf of the people if the mayor is deciding not to, and it's really, really important and clear. That is a line that I think is going to exist, as I mentioned, in any power. You can say that about whatever powers we have now. We say that about the powers of the comptroller or the board president. That people can just use those powers. That doesn't mean that they're not needed to make sure that people and the New Yorkers are protected. And I think we saw a great example of that the past year.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I failed to ask if anybody online. Do we still have commissioners online? If you all have any questions. No. Okay. All right.
I answered all the questions.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate.
Thank you, Mr. Public Advocate, for your
blessing. Thank you. Oh, one more.
Just more of a statement, just for the record, just wanted to clarify the advice and consent proposal that would put forward potentially would include the NYPD commissioner.
But not the DOE, correct?
No, because of state law.
Yeah.
But basically all mayoral agencies.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to call our next witness, City Councilwoman Crystal Hudson.
Can you see me over the podium? Okay. I'll pass on the stool, but I do appreciate the offer. Good evening. My name is Crystal Hudson. I'm the council member for the 35th Councilmanic District, which includes the neighborhoods of Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Prospect Heights, and Crown Heights. Thank you so much to co-chairs Henry Garrido and Arva Rice and the entire commission and staff for the opportunity to testify tonight. While there's much to be done to reform the city charter to better meet this moment, I want to focus on what's top of mind for nearly every elected official and policymaker confronting our city's unprecedented housing crisis. New York City's rental vacancy rate is just 1.4% and under 1% for apartments renting below $1,650. Housing costs are at record highs, reshaping our communities and displacing families who've lived here for generations. In my district alone, we've lost 20% of our Black population in the decade preceding my time in office. Supply is simply not keeping up with demand, especially the supply of affordable housing options for working families. Since entering office, I've approved nearly 6,000 new units in my district. Recently, Councilmember Osei and I worked together to pass the Atlantic Avenue Mixed Use Plan, or AMUP, which will bring 4,600 new homes, 40% of them affordable for working families, to our districts. This rezoning represents a new standard for what equitable community-led planning can look like in New York City. AMUP was years in the making, built through deep public engagement, collaborative governance, and an unwavering commitment to local priorities. From the M-Crown framework to the Community Vision and Priorities Report and more than a dozen public meetings, AMUP shows what's possible when communities are empowered, their voices are heard, and their priorities are put first. The plan includes major investments in parks, schools, tenant protections, and infrastructure, and demonstrates that we can expand housing while also addressing historic disinvestment and displacement. For this commission, AMUP should serve as a guiding example of how transparency, accountability, and community trust must be the foundation of any land use process. Strengthening local democracy means ensuring that communities not only have a voice, but real power in shaping the future of their neighborhoods, and AMUP shows us how. My district is 8th out of 51 for producing the most affordable housing units across the past decade. That's a record I'm proud of. Yet some parts of our city haven't produced anywhere near this amount of housing. There are some communities that have barely seen one new building go up in years. While some communities are doing their part to address the housing crisis, it is clear that many others are not. We know every neighborhood and district is different, but we can't keep relying on the South Bronx, Southeast Queens, or Northern and Central Brooklyn to build us out of this crisis. We need everyone to do their part. That's why this commission's work is so critical. You have the chance to strengthen transparency, rebuild trust in government, and ensure communities are meaningfully engaged in shaping their futures. One of the greatest obstacles to public support for development is a deep mistrust of developers. That's why I'm offering several proposals for your review. These measures can hold developers more accountable to community needs while reducing unnecessary barriers to building more housing. I'll expand on this in more detail in my written remarks, but I urge the commission to consider steps to amend the city charter in several key areas. First, requiring mandatory community plans for each community district. Second, incorporating community review and discussion mechanisms into the pre-certification stage of the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, or ULURP. Third, mandating financial transparency from developers. And fourth, consolidating the community board and borough president review periods. As you consider these proposals, I hope the commission continues its strong work of building on the city council's legacy under Speaker Adams to make our government more responsive to the needs of our constituents, especially around housing, by ensuring the charter better reflects these goals of transparency and collaboration. Thank you for your time and for your work to enhance accountability and transparency in city government.
Thank you so much. We'll ask if any of the commissioners have any questions.
Thank you, council member. You're giving an example, which is a great example of a district where you have worked hard to get community input and gotten things built. And you also note that within some districts, it hasn't happened.
Right.
And I guess I'm sort of stepping up to a higher level than the details, but in terms of the balance of community input, which in some cases leads to things getting built, versus a situation where you have community input council member deference and things don't get built, do you just have any thoughts of advice of how we continue to push forward to ensure that we get more housing built and more affordable housing built within that high level issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question that I think hits exactly sort of the point that I'm trying to make. I think that there's a way to do it. I think much is in the process. I think what I've learned, and listen, I also understand that every district is different, as I mentioned, and so the appetite for development is different across districts throughout the city, depending on how much you've already experienced building versus not. But I will say that in my own personal experience, as somebody who used to sit on a community board and who went through the process from that end and then coming into the council, I have found that most people just want to be heard and they want to be part of any sort of process. And I think the current processes we have in place are limiting in the type of engagement and meaningful, thoughtful engagement that can occur. And so I think through a community planning process that's very intentional and deliberate, it would actually provide an opportunity for more people to support development and more building through an engagement process that they actually feel a genuine part of versus the sort of tinkering around the edges, if you will, that's involved in the ULURP process, where I think most of the time what happens is that a developer comes in with a fully baked project, and then the community, because they've not been part of designing that so-called project, they delay the process because I mean, I've been part of conversations where people are literally changing the color of the bricks because they just want to feel like they can have some sort of impact or effect on the development. I think if we sort of go to the beginning of that process, and I'm happy to share some of the more specifics, but it is in my written testimony, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But I have very specific recommendations on how I think we can both reduce the amount of time within the ULURP process overall, and then also engage community in a more deliberate way that I think will bring about more support, more broader support for new housing.
Commissioner Jones and then Commissioner Winston Griffith.
Good evening, Councilmember Hudson.
Good evening.
My question, and we've heard a lot about fair share, right? And I think a lot of people are pointing to your very point that there are certain borough places. Would you endorse it? It just feels like
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
whether or not there's, whether or not we think that there's an appetite for mandating a fair share.
I think there's an appetite for it. Absolutely. I don't know how else you'll actually get to enforce fair share if it's not mandated. I think any opportunity that people have to not, contribute their fair share, they're going to take it. And so I think without a mandate, you won't necessarily get it.
Commissioner Winston Griffith.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. My question sort of harkens back to what was said earlier or asked earlier. There was an article in New York Times today that seemed to suggest that the city council and community boards in some ways sort of sometimes slowed down the process of establishing affordable housing. And so how do you feel about this idea that there should be some way to, if necessary, there should be some nuclear option, I guess you could call it, of overriding city council approval or disapproval?
I think that those types of proposals are, I'm trying to think about the most polite way to say this. I think they're trying to usurp the council's power. And I think, without trying to politicize my comments too much, I think that now is a time that is just as important, if not more important than any other time, to ensure the city council maintains its balance of power as a co-equal branch of government here in New York City. And so I think that there are ways to ensure the building of housing is expedited. And again, I have those, in my written testimony, but I think cutting out the council as a body that has been duly elected to represent the 8.5 million New Yorkers that we represent is an undemocratic proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I'm struggling with what feels like a conflict, and maybe I'm at a disadvantage because I haven't read your written testimony yet, which I look forward to doing, because I'm really intrigued by the recommendations that it sounds like you have about really involving the community at the very foundational level. And it sounds like you're saying that when you do that, there's a better chance of overcoming resistance to new projects that a community might have a knee-jerk opposition to. But then in response to Commissioner Jones's question, I really heard you say clearly that without a mandate for fair share housing, it won't get done. And I'm feeling a conflict there.
I don't think contributing one's fair share and engaging the community in an intentional way are mutually exclusive. So I think you can both mandate a fair share in a way that is equitable, right? And doesn't just come and bulldoze and use, for example, eminent domain to remove the homes of, low income New Yorkers of color, as an example, to build whatever, the government desires to build. And I'm speaking as someone who represents Atlantic Yards and the Barclays Center, and somebody who grew up, I live behind the Barclays Center, and I grew up.
I'm next door to you and not in
Okay.
your district, unfortunately, but yeah, next door.
Yeah.
And been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And, during the whole Atlantic Yards.
Yeah, and so that is an example of eminent domain being used to literally take the homes of Black and Puerto Rican people in order to build a development that still hasn't delivered on its promises to the community. I mean, we were just at a rally a few weeks ago demanding that the governor and Empire State Development actually delivers on its promise that was made 20 years ago when it inked the deal that said if 2,500 roughly units were not built, affordable units specifically, were not built by 2025, which back then seemed like, forever in the future, that the developer would be responsible for paying a certain amount of money per unit per month that was not yet developed. And that amount, so it's about 800, forgive me because, the press conference was a few weeks ago. I don't remember all the specific numbers, but it's roughly 800 or so units of affordable housing that has yet to be built. It's equivalent to about 40% of the total units that were delivered that have still yet to be built. And it's $1.754 million per month that they would be required to pay for the units that have yet to be delivered, the affordable units that have yet to be delivered. Now, the governor and Empire State Development have said, oh, don't worry about it. It's okay, we'll figure it out. And the community is saying, no, 20 years ago, you promised that you would deliver all of these affordable units, and you have not delivered almost half of them. And we should be paid. The community should receive money so that we can go and build the affordable housing that, hasn't yet been built and that we were owed. And so I just use that as an example to say, I do think that has to be done equitably. I don't think you can just bulldoze your way through a community and say, you haven't done your fair share. And so now we're going to raise this land and build what we think should be built, which could be, market rate units that are unaffordable to anybody who's been in the community. But I do think that there can be a mandate for a community to do its fair share that is done in an equitable way that takes into account the needs and desires and expectations and the historic values of a particular neighborhood. And just to give another example, like Staten Island is not a district or community, it's 3 community districts, but is not an area of like very high development, right? Generally speaking. So I don't think fair share should mean that we're going to go and build skyscrapers on Staten Island. But it does mean that instead of building or having exclusionary zoning that really only builds single family housing, that we're building maybe 3-story housing developments or 6-story, apartment buildings or something like that, that sort of reflects the needs and the culture and the makeup of said community. So I think you can mandate fair share and also engage community in a more deliberate and intentional way to get broader buy-in. And sorry, that was a
Thank
little
you.
long-winded.
No, that was great. Thank you. And it's a both and
Right.
is the
Right, not
very
either or.
short. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have just said that.
We have 2 more questions by our commissioners that are here, and then I will also recognize to see if there's any questions for the commissioners that are online.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just introduce myself because I joined late and I'm very sorry, but my name is Serena Longley and I'm appointed by, I almost said Commissioner, Speaker Adrian Adams. Thank you, Council Member, for your testimony. Wanted to follow up on something you said a few minutes ago, that you thought to cut out the council would be undemocratic in terms of the ULURP process. Do you think it would be undemocratic, and or do you think this commission should consider doing anything to preempt or prevent the current council norm of allowing local council members to essentially veto developments in their districts? And I apologize in advance. I know it's a sensitive
I was going to
topic.
say, I was hoping nobody would ask me about member deference because I have very specific and strong views on member deference. And I guess the somewhat politically correct answer I can provide on the record would be that we should think creatively about how to ensure we can build more housing and also respect the needs and the demands of communities that are represented by those who've been elected to represent them. Yeah. I'll sort of leave it there. I'm happy to talk offline.
Thank you.
Off the
Thank you.
record.
No, thank you for even attempting.
Appreciate
It's
that.
it's a touchy subject. And I'm probably on, a medium-sized island with maybe just a few others in my personal beliefs about member deference.
Commissioner Miraglia?
Thank you for being here, council member. I was very much going to put you on the spot with member deference. But you answered the question. I appreciate your viewpoints very much. And your diplomatic but thoughtful answer as well. So I'll move on.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from our commissioners who are joining us on Zoom?
No, I will candidly admit that I have the same question, so we all appreciate your response. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
City
you all so
Councilwoman.
much.
We appreciate it. I want to call our next witness, Linda Tigagli. You could, yes, thank you. And you can correct my mispronunciation when you come to the stage. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you so much for your time and your service and this opportunity. My name is Linda Tajani, and I have the honor of serving as the chair and executive director for the New York City Commission on Racial Equity. CORE is a product of the November 2022 ballot measure proposed by another charter revision commission to redress longstanding racial disparities in power, access, and opportunity. CORE exercises its accountability function first and foremost through oversight of a citywide racial equity plan, outlining goals and strategies for reducing racial disparities in social and economic well-being. Among other requirements, the plan is meant to map existing needs by neighborhood so that individual agencies can target services and policies according to the data furnished by these maps, so that they should provide the public with the information necessary to enable community members to hold agencies publicly accountable for progress. Our ability to exercise this accountability role, however, remains hampered by the failure of the city to release its inaugural racial equity plan. Apart from betraying the thousands of New Yorkers who voted to embed racial equity goals into government operations and dismissing the vision of a just New York expressed by our community partners, this failure represents a disdain for the rule of law, inconsistent with a healthy democracy. In our city, if our city is to be a government of laws and not of political whim, then it cannot simply disregard its legal obligations at will. Moreover, at a moment of overt hostility on the part of the federal government and a movement away from inclusivity among public and private institutions, the city's inaction with regard to racial equity planning represents a missed opportunity to reinforce its commitment to individuals harmed by racism and social injustice. So I begin our testimony, therefore, with an urgent appeal to the Commission and to the City Council that convened it to continue to demand that CORE be empowered to fulfill the human rights watchdog function attributed to it in the preliminary staff report. To address inequities in representation and decision-making, the Racial Justice Commission envisioned CORE as a body led by community members and representative of populations most harmed by racial injustice. In directing that CORE be positioned to represent members of New Yorkers who do not typically have representation in decision-making. Although our commissioners are wholly committed to advancing racial equity in government operations, we propose and recommend that the charter explicitly limit membership for those who have never before served, either voluntarily or by pay, in a New York City government decision-making body, including at least one such individual under the age of 25. We do have further recommendations outlined in written testimony that will be submitted to the Commission supporting advice and consent, specifically for the NYPD Commissioner role. Additionally, addressing gaps in budget processing, particularly addressing oversight that the Office of Management and Budget has over CORE's budget, as well as under independent agencies, thereby circumventing our work as an oversight agency. And we also do address a request, or rather make a request for enforcement powers, including the ability to audit and or subpoena data from city agencies to ensure that we can fulfill our charter mandated goals. I'm going to stop now since I am out of time, but our testimony does go further into detail and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions? Yes.
Thank you for your testimony. You earlier referenced the fact that is it a report that has been held up?
Yes,
So,
so
right.
the city is at this point approximately 500 days late releasing the preliminary racial equity plan, which was due on January 16th of 2024.
Right.
Because we do not have any enforcement powers, we cannot audit or subpoena. We are not able to see the draft plan, which we understand to be complete and sitting with the mayor's team right now. We are where CORE started the second round of engagement, as there's a racial equity planning process outlined in the charter with exact dates. We are required to provide an update on community equity priorities October 1st of 2025. Both the preliminary plan and the final citywide racial equity plan have both been delayed. So the city has not completed its first round, but according to the charter, we are supposed to start the second round October 1st of 2025.
And what do you see as being beyond what you just mentioned, so the practical implications of that report, that preliminary report being held back?
So the preliminary report and the city's citywide racial equity planning process is specifically aligned with our process to release budgets on a yearly basis. So the preliminary report is due the day that the budget is due, January 16th. So the idea from the Racial Justice Commission and the way that it was written in the charter is that the racial equity plan for the city should be shifting investments in city agencies to align with closing and eliminating racial disparities in the city. Without having a racial equity plan, the mayor's team can continue to increase or exacerbate existing racial equity disparities. It also denies the people the opportunity to participate actively in the budgeting process. The current charter requires that the city release the preliminary plan, allow for CORE to publicly respond within 30 days, and our response must also include response from the public. So we are to work with the public to have them comment on the plan, which is one way they can directly comment on the city's budgeting process. We have worked with 4,212 New Yorkers to come up with 18 community equity priorities. Those over 4,000 New Yorkers want to participate in the racial equity planning process and the budget process more directly. And we have had to tell them time and time again that the mayor is holding up the plan and there is no current release date.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Yu.
Hi, having been on the racial justice, on the commission, thank you for this information because like many of my fellow commissioners, we have been asking the questions. Where are we in this process? What's happening? Because we had a very clear mandate from the people when this went to vote. And we've been asking for updates personally and professionally. And I've never, to be honest, had a satisfactory answer. So this tells me a lot. And I really appreciate you being here and shedding some light on what is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll also say city agencies consistently ask me as well for updates, even though that is the responsibility of the mayor and the team to tell all 45 city agencies that have completed a full draft plan and submitted it and has had it reviewed why their plan is not being released.
So, you know, with the mayoral transition, as our plan came out, my fellow commissioners and I, we were afraid that the plan was going to be received with lukewarm response. And we said, wondering how far is this going to get pushed? These are the priorities of New Yorkers, of people who have consistently been overlooked and marginalized. And so we hoped and prayed that this would be something that this administration would take up and to make this a priority. And sadly, it hasn't happened. And I'll tell you that having spent 18 months on that commission, I'm frustrated and I'm really disappointed and, you know, I'm pissed.
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners? Yes.
Thank you. Just really quick, I'm sorry if I missed this, and maybe it's in your written testimony, but have you gotten any explanation about why this is 500 days late?
What I have been told from the mayor's team is that it's under review by the law department. It has been with the law department since the end of September. They are not giving any further indication about what's holding it up. And the mayor was also directly asked this question at the NAN conference and also indicated that Corporation Counsel is unwilling to give it a go to release to the public.
Are there any other questions? I just wanted to ask, in the original drafting of the commission, was there initially any other stronger either repercussions or any other stronger language to make sure that the report would be released that just didn't make it, or I just wondered if there was anything that was more accountability that was there initially.
So to my understanding and my read of the charter, we still hold the same rights as any other independent commission that is in tension or conflict with the mayor's team over what the charter language says, particularly with respect to what are the accountability mechanisms that we're able to employ, one being a route of litigation, another being a route of public pressure. Aside from those two routes, there's no other mechanism that's listed in the charter for us to take. And what we are now hearing, so we had 4,212 New Yorkers in the first round. We are currently in our second round. We have 1,200 additional New Yorkers that are stepping up. And they do want to continue to put public pressure, but at this point, those are the only two routes that we have available. And I just also want to echo what the public advocate had shared with respect to our ability to have standing in court and whether or not we would be in conflict with Corporation Counsel, that we also are asking for and would strongly recommend thinking about how independent commissions can actually be truly independent. When the mayor's office determines our budget and Corporation Counsel determines whether or not we're able to bring litigation, that completely undermines what is defined as an independent commission. And certainly we want to echo and support the recommendations that are in your current report. We think that that would be extremely helpful to ensuring that we have all of the accountability mechanisms at our disposal should we need them. And then unfortunately, it looks like we are going into the second planning cycle according to the charter with no first plan and two budget cycles that have gone past with this mayor with the requirement of this plan that does not address racial equity disparities in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it. I'd like to bring our next witness, who is Heather Beers Demetridis. Heather?
Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Heather Beers Demetriadis. I'm presently the chair of Queens Community Board 6, representing Rego Park and Forest Hills. I'm here in the role as chair tonight to talk to you about an issue that I think is very important. Following the end of the COVID-19 pandemic, executive orders that temporarily authorized fully remote public meetings, including community board meetings, expired, forcing a return to in-person gatherings under the existing New York City Charter. These emergency provisions allow boards to maintain operations and increase public participation through digital access. Their expiration has left board leadership sort of navigating outdated legal requirements that no longer reflect the realities and needs of modern civic engagement. Community board chairs and district managers are doing their best to comply with a charter that mandates in-person meetings within the district, but has not been updated to account for technological tools that proved essential during the pandemic. There are real compelling reasons to permit remote attendance, from accessibility for disabled or elderly residents to greater inclusion for working families, to the ability for board members to fulfill their duties when traveling or an illness of their own or a family member. So to address this gap, the charter should be amended to do the following. First, codify hybrid meeting options. The charter mandates in-person meetings with no formal allowance for remote or hybrid participation. You can improve that by looking at Section 2800H and require hybrid meetings whenever feasible. Ensure the public can observe and comment remotely, and allow board members who are experiencing a form of extraordinary circumstance to participate and vote remotely, provided a quorum is physically present. The second thing is to mandate real-time public comment via remote access. Boards may live stream or broadcast meetings, but are not currently required to accept real-time remote public comment. An improvement would be including language where public comment opportunities for both in-person and remote attendees, and reasonable accommodation, interpreters, closed captioning, and then make sure there are clear procedures for remote sign-up and participation. The third thing is to define technological standards and accessibility. The current issue is there's no consistent citywide standard for remote access. And what we currently have is a hodgepodge of policies that vary between boards and boroughs. An improvement would be to use a uniform, accessible digital platform and to establish technical requirements such as audio quality, recording archives. The last thing is, well, the last recommendation would be to have emergency provisions and flexibility. During emergencies, boards need to act without physical presence at times. So it would be an opportunity for the charter to have a clause that grants emergency authority to hold virtual meetings, and it would require a 30-day review by borough presidents to extend virtually only meetings if necessary, and would include criteria like public health, weather, or facility access issues. Lastly, to accomplish this, however, we also need the charter to be amended to support an increase in budget for community boards. We all know that community boards get asked to do more with less year upon year. So I am suggesting a charter amendment includes the following. Community board budgets are tied to city budget growth. For example, community board funding shall increase annually at a rate no less than a certain percentage increase in adopted expense budget of the city of New York. In closing, we need to bring community boards into this century without sacrificing civic engagement. These proposed changes will help us do that. Lastly, we need budgets that will allow us to accomplish this task. Codifying a budget increase would give us the assurance that we need. Thank you, commissioners, for your time this evening. And thank you so much for your service. Hearing tonight what's happening, as a community board chair, some of this is very, very exciting. So I am truly appreciative of the dedication and creativity and openness that you've had to bring to this process. So thank you very much.
Oh, much appreciated. Yes.
Hi, Heather. Good to see you.
Hello.
So as a policy matter, I agree with almost everything that you said.
Thank you.
And you know, since we talk multiple times a week on community board issues,
Indeed.
that this question of remote access and having more flexibility for community boards is one that I care about a lot. The borough president cares a lot about.
Yeah.
One of the issues that this commission, I think, has run into quite often is we're somewhat limited in what we can tackle. So with respect to amending the charter to enact some of the proposals you've brought forth, my understanding at least is that the real barrier here is the open meetings law. So under the open meetings law, that applies to every public body in the state of New York, including community boards. And I agree with you as a policy question. I mean, I think during COVID, community boards demonstrated that they were able to conduct their business efficiently and openly. And I think that we saw a lot of, silver linings with respect to public engagement and the types of folks that we can get engaged in the community board. I don't know whether you've thought about this issue or sort of dealt with ways that we might be able to amend the charter that wouldn't conflict with the open meetings law. I think certainly I would be supportive of that, but in my analysis of this to date, the open meetings law, because it does require that there be an in-person quorum, and then apart from that, there's the extraordinary circumstances provision that allows people to participate remotely. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. I'd be happy to continue the conversation offline too.
The way I see it is that at some point, we've got to lay the groundwork, right? We've got to be able to have in the charter, because at some point in time, if and when, hopefully more when than if, they will make the necessary changes in the open meetings law that will allow a scenario such as I'm proposing tonight. But even at that time, these changes will still have to be made to the charter in order to support that, because that in itself, once it's passed, will still be at odds with the way that some of the charter is laid out. And I think what this does is if we make the changes ahead of time, we're preparing for what we hope will become an eventuality. And I'll say this, we saw huge changes in attendance in community boards, but I also noticed it at the Community Education Council meetings. You went from having 13 people in a room to having 130 people in a room consistently throughout. And so we're seeing that this what was initially deemed as a barrier to civic engagement is no longer. It's actually opened up the process for people, and we want to continue to avail ourselves. And I think there's ways to do that without even, I know there's concerns sometimes about not having enough people in the room. But if you have that extraordinary circumstances, like for instance, our board modeled our extraordinary circumstances after the plan that your code of conduct policy that the borough president has that would provide for an excused absence, because we think that's a fair parallel, right? So we've done that to provide unique circumstances. So it isn't just that you don't feel like showing up in person, is that you have these unique scenarios. So it's not like you wouldn't have people, a majority of people showing up to a meeting. But I do think that whether or not that when the time comes, and I speak in when because I'm a hopeful individual, that the open meetings law will catch up with the times that doing this has us all ready and raring to go. And I think it would be nice for once to see us ready for something, rather than be caught unaware with our pants down around our ankles, waiting to fix it. So to speak, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
we,
testimony.
we're not taking that literally. Thank you.
Thank you for
welcome.
your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you all so very much.
We're going
Say something on Fair Share real quick. Just something that struck me
very
tonight.
quickly, please.
Yeah, our community board recently had an opportunity to have 2 shelters moved into our community. Until then, we didn't have shelters. I believe clearly that community boards can work really hard with the necessary agencies to bring shelters and to do our fair share and to do our fair lift within this community. But one of the things that I truly believe is that we can't legislate people's mind shift. We have to have those essential conversations. And that's one of the things that I have seen in community work is that we had those really tough conversations about getting 2 shelters literally within months of each other. It's been seamless. It's been great. But we would not have had that success if we weren't able to have those conversations of changing hearts and minds as opposed to legislating solutions that make certain mandates, because you're still going to have the same resistance in that community if those essential conversations aren't had. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We're going to ask our next panelist. Vladimir Talley.
Hola, buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much to the Commission for the opportunity to testify. My name is Vladimir Tlali, and I proudly serve as the Senior Policy Strategist at the New York Immigration Coalition. We represent over 200 immigrant-serving organizations across the state of New York, particularly New York City. Balance of powers is a core principle of our democracy. In a time of unprecedented federal attacks on immigrant communities, local democracy must be strong, transparent, and accountable. We support the Commission's work to expand legislative and budgetary oversight of the local executive power, increase civic participation, and bring transparency to how decisions are made in our city. We are especially supportive of 4 key proposals. First, we support requiring public hearings and reporting when the mayor suspends local laws under emergency declarations. In October of 2022, Mayor Adams' emergency declaration allowed his administration to bypass city procurement rules with little oversight, resulting in millions of misallocated dollars. A report from the New York City Comptroller found that for-profit companies took advantage of the emergency and charged exorbitant rates for services that the city typically procures at much lower cost. Second, we support a democratic and transparent process for mayoral removal. When Mayor Adams displayed behaviors that undermined the trust of immigrant New Yorkers, who comprise 40% of New York City's population, and his ability to prioritize their communities over particular interests, and quid pro quo with the federal administration, there was no clear local process for removal. That needs to change. Third, we urge the Commission to consider strengthening the independence of the Commission on Human Rights, requiring the CCHR to consult with the mayor before investigating city officials compromises its integrity. The mayor also appoints all of its members, including the chairperson, who serves at his pleasure. We support reforms to ensure the Commission can act independently. Fourth, we strongly support increased budgeted transparency and oversight. Even when the funding is appropriated in the budget, critical services, especially for asylum seekers, are delayed due to lack of spending or tracking. For example, according to the City Comptroller, hundreds of millions of allocated funds for asylum-related services in fiscal year 23 went unpaid. We support clarifying Charter Section 254A to give the Council the power to modify or subdivide units of appropriation so that program spending can be accurately tracked. And we also support the Commission's proposal to require the mayor to differentiate between fiscal necessity, technical, and non-fiscal, politically based or policy-based impoundments or underspending by mandating public reporting of the Office of Management and Budget's quarterly allotments under Section 106B. Our communities deserve a government that listens, that acts transparently, and that's accountable, not just during elections, but every day. We urge you to advance these reforms. Thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Do you have any commissioners have questions yet?
Yeah, thank you for your testimony. And given all the kind of important work that the New York Immigration Coalition does, I guess I'm interested when you think about the UAs and breaking them down more than they are now. Is there any way that you could see that specifically helping your organizations or organizations like yours, or is it more of a policy thing for the city as a whole?
Yeah, no, completely. There is several programs that serve immigrant communities that are completely in the dark, right? I actually was looking into the budget today because that's what I do. I was trying to identify budget for city FEPs. I couldn't find it because it's buried into the units of appropriation. Luckily, the city council adopted a new terms and condition in this budget. So that's something that we really commend. Last year, the City Council also adopted a new unit of appropriation for Promise NYC, which is a program that supports immigrants who otherwise cannot access childcare. So we were supportive of that too. It is, in general, a situation that will benefit everybody in New York City, not necessarily immigrants, but it will also benefit immigrants. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner.
I just wanted to say thank you to the NYSC. It's like every day we wake up to some horrific policy, TPS ending. Now naturalized citizens are going to be reviewed. Like our friends and co-workers are seen as enemies and that people are disappearing. And I know that you guys are on the front lines. And I just want to say thank you so much for all the work you do.
Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Taif Alam, if you can come.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Saif Alam. I'm one of the civic leaders in Jamaica Hills. Today, I'm testifying to advice and consent power under government accountability. I support the advice and consent bill where the city council has authority to approve or deny mayoral appointees, which is including commissioners. However, I want to add the suggestion that we should include the language in the charter to enable city council members to consult with their community boards and civic associations for input before casting their vote whether or not to approve commissioners. The community boards and civic associations can consult with residents and gather their input to support the appointment of the commissioners. This can strengthen the input of our fellow New Yorkers. As a civic leader myself, I value the input of our residents because they can weigh in what leaders can prefer to represent their needs and interests. For the timeline with the approval of commissioners, the New York City mayor is elected in November. After being elected, the mayor can forward the list of preferred commissioners to city council members. Council members can then ask their community board and civics to weigh in. At the December meeting, council members can vote on the approval of the commissioner based on input of community boards and civics. Afterwards, the mayor can install the commissioners if approved by the city council by majority vote after being sworn in January. Just want to add in context, I am a community board member myself and especially a civic association member. I think it's very important for those bodies to have an input who the commission should be, because I think it's important to build public trust among New Yorkers. So I interact daily with residents on what their are. And I think it's important for us to have the direct relation with council members. So I hope you consider that revision in the charter to enable community boards and civic associations to consult with council members on the appointment.
Thank you so much. Do the commissioners have any questions? Very straightforward. Thank you so very much. We'd like to ask Daniel Mack. I'm sorry, Darren Mack.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Darren Mack, and I'm a co-director of Freedom Agenda. We are led by our members who have experienced incarceration of self or through their loved ones. We testified before this commission in May with recommendations to strengthen government accountability by enhancing the capacity, independence, and authority of the Board of Correction to set, assess, and enforce minimum standards in New York City jails. We were grateful to see that the updated staff recommendations published in June built on the previous staff recommendations to propose that BOC be allocated a minimum budget sufficient to carry out its duties, and that the power to appoint the chair should no longer rest solely with the mayor. These changes are important to make sure that BOC can fulfill its crucial oversight role. We urge the commission to adopt them in your final recommendations, and we urge you to go further to make sure BOC can truly be the lifeline that it should be for people who are subject to violations of minimum standards in New York City jails. An oversight body should be able to carry out its work without undue influence by the mayor. To prevent this undue influence on the Board of Correction, no more than 1/3 of its members should be appointed by the mayor. Currently, the mayor has appointment or approval power over 6 of the 9 board members. We suggest that the 9-member board should be appointed as follows: 3 by the mayor, 3 by the city council, 1 by the public advocate, 1 by the comptroller, and 1 appointed on a rotating basis by the longest serving borough president. Giving board members the power to appoint their own chair, as the commission report suggested, would be an improvement from the current charter, but will not create the level of independence needed if the structure of appointments is not changed. If the mayor still appoints the majority of board members and holds influence over them, he or she may exercise power over whom they vote for as board chair, giving the mayor the de facto authority to appoint the chair. Setting a minimum budget for the board, 1% of DOC's budget, would also be an important start to increasing their capacity and independence. But to make the fullest use of this expanded capacity, the board also needs to increase independence that will come from ensuring the mayor appoints no more than 1/3 of their members, and that the executive director has the authority to carry out their duties independently. For example, an increased budget will mean the board can have staff doing direct observation in the jails more often, and they will be in a better position to report on violations of minimum standards. But once they find those violations, they need the independence to take action, like issuing a formal finding of violation without worrying that the mayor will retaliate against them. They should also have greater authority to take action, like the authority to retain outside counsel when needed, the authority to close facilities that fail to comply with minimum standards, and the authority to release people subjected to consistent and humane treatment. With our written testimony, we submitted a full list of recommended changes to the city charter related to the Board of Correction. Strengthening jail oversight, along with closing Rikers, is crucial to holding our city government accountable for its responsibility for humane treatment of people kept in its custody. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Do the commissioners have any questions? Any questions? I just had a question about the proposed enforcement powers for the Board of Corrections. So the question that was presented to us is that how would this function work if there's given federal oversight of Rikers, right? So we have federal oversight of Rikers and the constraints of the union contracts. how could we make sure that there is staff discipline that takes place in the areas that where it needs to happen? Where you're talking about how people are experiencing inhumane treatment. Like how do you see that working?
Yeah, this is a really historic and unique situation with this remediation manager that's going to look like it's going to be put in place. Like as far as I know right now, DOC and for like one of the first times that a receiver has taken over a jail system, the monitors also going to be still operating. And I don't know exactly like how that's going to play out in regards to the role for BOC. BOC still going to function, but that's why one of the recommendations that we're calling for, advocating for, is that they be allowed to have a counsel, because if DOC is still involved with this remediation manager, then it might be a conflict of interest from between like the city law department and who might be representing DOC if DOC like needs to like take action. So by having their own independent counsel, that might help with some of the conflicts between DOC and the city law department. But it's unprecedented situation, so we don't really know exactly how it's going to look or how it's going to play out. But yeah, that's some of my thoughts regarding that.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we bring up panelist George James? Hansen? Yeah. George Hansen.
Great, thank you. My name is George Janes. I'm the planner who often works with community boards, and today I am here on my own time to provide support to the Commission's land use recommendations. The volunteers that serve our community boards bring an enormous amount of passion to our land use process, yet much of their energy and civic pride is wasted in a process that does not productively harness their power. You sit on a commission to strengthen local democracy. Let's start by strengthening our community boards by designing a charter that recognizes their key role in shaping the city and its neighborhoods. While the charter permits local plans, as you know, it's been years since one has been formally adopted. And it's not only too expensive, but any formal community planning effort will run into obstacles designed to diminish local decision-making. Most people would agree that every community district should have a local land use plan that is consistent with a comprehensive plan. That plan should guide development and growth in a district. If a rezoning proposal is not consistent with plan, then either the plan is revised or the zoning proposal is modified or rejected. This is not radical. This should be typical. The Commission's efforts in reforming our planning process move us closer to such a model, and I'm fully supportive of your efforts. I want to finish with an undiscussed issue for your consideration. We talk a lot about zoning in this town, but the mayor can, and often does, sign a piece of paper to override zoning, a mayoral zoning override. Based on a FOIL of 135 zoning overrides, we learned that they're usually small, but they can be enormous. Zoning overrides are defined in New York State case law, but the process in which they're handed out needs sunlight. It needs oversight. When a mayor wishes to override zoning, at minimum, the application should be forwarded to the community board and/or the borough president for comment and consideration. Or something else, something that maybe involves council because it is overriding a local law. But a little sunlight can help to discourage the worst of the decisions that hide behind mayoral zoning overrides. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Do any of our commissioners have any questions? No? Okay, thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before you begin, we want to ask Rain Radley if you would come and make your presentation. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Rain. It's good to see you again in person. I'm here today because I think there needs to be oversight on the housing court judges. I am the president of my tenant union, and I've been seeing a lot of just fraud and corruption over the last couple of years as we've been doing more and more cases. In my case specifically, right, I actually finally got evicted yesterday. So I've been in and out of the shelter system, which is rough because I'm immunocompromised and it's 10 beds to a room and all of that. And how they ended up doing that was our gas in the whole building shut off for 5 months, gave nobody rebates. We went and told everybody, hey, these are your rights, call 311, you're entitled to this. They sued everybody, retaliated. I said, hey, this is retaliation, you can't do that. Sued me again while stealing my HRA rental payments, right? Had to call them out because HRA called saying, hey, you have fraud on your account, we're gonna have to close your case. Found out when they restarted the case again, trying to get me out of this apartment, that they had been lying for about a decade about the rent stabilization status. And there were no repercussions from the judge for that as well. And so the holdover continued. And now we found out that they are telling the city that I have a Section 8 voucher, which I wish I had, and that I owe back rent, even though we had a final judgment from the judge for me to have been out at the end of May. So these are things that are happening to every single tenant in my building over and over. And if it's not one thing, it's another thing, and it's back to back. And it's making it really impossible for people to stay housed. Because even though technically they say, yes, you are correct, they're doing illegal things, you have to go to another court to sue them and pay this amount of money and go through months and months of proceedings. And in the meantime, you just have to be on the street. Even though I did nothing wrong. And these are tenants in my building also who are immigrants, so they're too scared to say anything with the current climate that's going on. And I don't know how to advocate for them against these judges who are clearly crooked. So right now, the issue I'm facing with, just so you see how the picture of the situation is, right? You go to HRA, you can't get a one-shot deal very easily if you're a single adult, right? They send you to home base. You're not applicable for city FEPs unless you've already been through the shelter system or APS refers you, but I'm sure you know that APS is not taking very many cases at all. And so then from there, you're like, okay, well, what do? I applied for NYCHA, I got accepted, but it's 2-year wait for a placement. I'm clearly disabled, and I have another surgery coming up now. They said I have to get a stoma, which is a big recovery. And I still don't have disability. I actually went to SSA today to ask them how my appeal was coming along. They said to wait another 10 months. I'm on the street right now. So thankfully my girlfriend has a NYCHA apartment, right? But I can only stay there a couple days at a time, and it's on the 4th floor. So right now I'm dragging myself up the stairs in order to have housing and to feed my cat, who also is an emotional support animal, but is not welcome in the shelter yet because they're saying it's going to take 1 to 2 weeks to process her paperwork. So this is kind of the situation. This is how hard this is for people. And I'm mentally present, right? Mm-hmm. I'm fairly good at advocating for myself. Mm-hmm. Many people do not have those privileges. Mm-hmm. And I'm terrified now that even I don't have the stability to be able to speak up for them and to be able to organize in the building that I'm no longer welcome in.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming and providing that with us today. We appreciate you.
Of course. So.
Do the commissioners have any questions? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time.
We have Francie Scanlon, who's joining us by Zoom.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Good to be with you. I am Francie Scanlon. I am a former member of Community Board number 7. I will be brief. My focus is a request to amend yet again the preamble to the city charter, which, as you know, was only first created in 2022 by a ballot referendum. An earlier speaker made reference to still the open issue of moving on the equity piece of that charter. In my opinion, responsive process is accountable power, and process is power. I believe tonight repeatedly, whether it was Mr. James who just spoke from a depth of experience about the need to strengthen community boards, whether it was the speaker who spoke to the issue of advice and consent, whether it was the public advocate who said, yes, his office must be strengthened and have the legal capacity to do what it is mandated to do. If you look at the through line to all those who have spoken tonight, there is a crying out, a desperate plea for attention to be paid to a responsible, accountable government. And that type of government, in my view, is not a government that only dictates to others and to one another within it what others should do, but also embraces fully and wholeheartedly the accountability that it must exercise and the discipline it must exercise precisely because it has power. There is one issue that I cite, which is current. After 60 years, Queens, the world's borough, has suddenly gotten a Queens bus network redesign. It was wildly heralded. The problem is on the ground, it is not playing out well. There is massive disruption, and it manifested all the ills. And what it does, regrettably, in my opinion, is undermine the core bedrock principle of representative democracy. If you want to have a strengthened local democracy, it must be accountable and it must be trustworthy. Getting buses moving, history teaches us, is no small matter. Thank you so much and keep up the good work.
Thank you so
Please.
very much. Do any of the commissioners have any questions? All right. If not, we will bring our last panelist, Ms. Maureen Gray. Good evening.
Am I good? Okay. All right, good afternoon. Is there any way to move it back further? That's it? All right, okay, we'll work with this. This is my first time making is it a testimony? Yeah, so basically I'm going to forget that this is a testimony because I only heard about this yesterday.
State your name again, Ms.
And
Gray.
my name is Maureen Gray.
Thank you.
I live in Southeast Queens. I live in St. Albans. I am a history teacher who has suddenly discovered the history of Southeast Queens. So I have a small little history group that we talk about certain things. We've gone to the Schomburg. We've learned a few things. But I am concerned mostly about the Jamaican Neighborhood Plan And since this is about local government, our local input has been very limited. One of the most important things I keep stressing with my city council representative is that there's a lack of communication in terms of flyers and posters. So I just happened to have been here yesterday and saw this flyer for this meeting. And this is a big meeting. This is important. I had no idea what was happening till yesterday. And I just encourage that there be more flyers as opposed to just internet communications as a policy. Be written in, just like we're talking about the community board hybrid meetings. This is something that's important for my generation, baby boom, and we're baby boom and living longer, and we're a generation of hand us a flyer. It makes it relevant. Now, my little history group, as long as I was talking about starting it, it was, oh, it's a dream. But the moment I put a flyer in people's hands, they're like, ooh, it's real. So my main concern is having more participation because we need to know what's happening. My entire district, I spoke to 4 people. Anybody I see now, they've never heard of the Jamaica Neighborhood Plan, and it's a drastic change. It's not a little change. It is monumental change all at once between the MTA buses, the lithium batteries, the Con Ed station being put right next to the Adelaide Park, which is a historic district. It's a massive change and people are concerned. They do want to know about it, but they don't know these meetings exist. So that is one of the points I want to mention. Now, one of my concerns is that as a history teacher, I've noticed that there are very few museums in Southeast Queens. And we should, and in the plan that I've seen with the JNP, it calls for festivals and a memory box. Well, we already have a memory box. The library already exists with a memory box program. But in terms of historical markers, in terms of museums in Southeast Queens and not on Jamaica Avenue alone, down in Southeast Queens, names of people that you probably are associated with. Gwen Ifill lived in Southeast Queens. George Washington slept in Southeast Queens. These are names that we don't know actually have come to live in Southeast Queens. People like Clarence Williams, we know him from Mod Squad, but his granddaddy is the first jazz player to come with his wife, Eva Taylor, to Southeast Queens. So I'm encouraging that we have, one, more communication with our commissioners, our city council, any of these civic meetings. And this is my first time being involved over the past 2 years in anything civic. So I'm really, as a teacher, I've always said, well, get involved. But now I'm finding out I can't find out where to get involved unless I'm, by accident. And I don't think that that's what your intention is as a commission, to have things accidentally known. As I was reading through the some information about the history for preparation for another testimony tomorrow, the local historian, Herbert Rickard, happened to have been the president of the Queens Library. He mentioned that all local government ceased on January 1st, 1898. The school districts, our towns, our local executives ceased. Please let not that be the situation here. All government is local. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Next, we need to adopt the minutes.
Next, we need to adopt the minutes from our May 19th, June 16th, June 17th, June 23rd, and June 26th hearings. They have been distributed to everyone, and all commissioners can vote to adopt minutes regardless of their attendance at the previous meetings, as long as you looked over the minutes. Are there any questions on the minutes? Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any oppositions? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. We would like to thank Louisa Benedito, Shannon Rocket, Hasselberg Khan, and the staff of the Central Queens Public Library for hosting us this evening. We'll conclude with a few notes on our process. First, we are not the only commission reviewing the charter. This commission is distinct from the Charter Revision Commission convened by the mayor. Both commissions are working simultaneously, but separately. Additionally, in the final days of this year's New York State legislative session, the Assembly and Senate passed a bill ensuring that mayoral proposals cannot displace other charter amendments from the ballot. Pending the governor's signature, our proposals could appear on the November ballot alongside those of the mayor's commission. We will hold a meeting later this month to decide which proposals should go before the voters. Registration and further details of that meeting will be posted to our website, www.thecommission.nyc. On the homepage, you will also find a link to a short survey in which you can tell us what you think of the changes we're considering making to the charter. We encourage you to share the survey with your friends, family, and community members so we can hear from as many New Yorkers as possible. I want to thank everyone who testified today, watched online or in person, and the commission staff who organized this meeting. Please note that if you were unable to testify today due to time constraints or technical difficulties, you can submit written testimony of any length up to 72 hours after this meeting concludes. Please send your testimony to info@thecommission.nyc. Are there any other questions or other business from the commissioners before we adjourn?
How about a round of applause for the staff?
Yes. Absolutely. Any other business before the commission? All right. Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you so very